we have this hadith, when Ramadan comes, the gates of paradise are opened and the gates of fire are closed and the devils are chained up, and a voice cries out, "O you who desire good, come forth. O you who desire evil, desist." So what does this mean? The scholars differed about this, because the issue is, Ramadan, so Ramadan comes in, the gates of paradise are open, and why on earth is everybody? Well, not everybody, we're hoping. Why is it some people do what in Ramadan? If all the shayateen are chained up and the gates of paradise are opened, the gates of hell are shut, you'd expect everyone what? To be good. Okay? So because there's no one to tempt you to do anything bad. So why is it that we still do bad? So the scholars looked at this and they said, do we take this literally, this hadith? And the general principle is that we take hadith literal, as long as there's not something that, that's clearly, some clear circumstantial evidence that shows that we can't take that as literal. So the scholars say, are they chained up, the shayateen? Those who said yes, the shayateen are chained up, they explain this hadith to say the suggestions that devils making are satanic suggestions that are made in our heads and we follow them in the year, they don't go away. So if you follow those suggestions of the devil and those and bow to your temptations throughout the year, then when you go into the month of Ramadan, they still linger, those suggestions, because you've acted upon them. Does that make sense? And so when you go into Ramadan, you're still going to have those habits that are ingrained in you because you followed them, but the impulses generally are going to be less stronger, because now they're not going to be followed up incessantly with the shayateen. That's how some of the scholars explain it. Okay? Others say, well, yeah, the shayateen are gone, but your nafs hasn't. Okay, so you've got clarity in Ramadan, you've got clarity what impulses are from the shayateen and which ones are from your soul, your lower self. Because we have 4 suggestions. The scholars traditionally, they divide the impulses that we have into 4. Is anyone aware of these categorization? So there's 4 impulses. There are divine impulses, and there are angelic impulses, and there are carnal impulses, i.e. the lower self. And we said, I'm hesitant to use the term lower self, because it's not necessarily negative. It's just that carnal impulse, towards sleep, towards eating, that has to be restrained to a certain degree, but it's natural impulses. You don't completely negate them and deny them. And then the 4th category is satanic impulses. And so a divine impulse is where the way I understand divine impulses is it's just a complete opening of a realization. Have you ever had those moments in your life where you just look at reality differently? It's just like, before you looked at a Mercedes Benz and you went, wicked, that's what I want, okay? And you said, that's sick, bro. And then maybe next year you look at that and you say, yeah, it's nice, but it's not, there's more important things to life than sitting in a Mercedes Benz or whatever car you like. You've shifted your perception of reality, it's grown. Does that make sense? So there's like divine inspirations and impulses. Sometimes they come all of a sudden, and they're very powerful, these impulses. Other times they're very subtle. They're just a shift in the perception of reality, because you've expanded your awareness towards something beyond and something greater than your very own self. And then you've got angelic inspirations, which are just those sort of impulses towards good acts. Like, say something nice to that person. Give some charity to that person. Don't do this. Hold back from this. These are angelic impulses that come to us. And then the 3rd one is really from us, is the carnal impulses. That impulse to sleep, that impulse to have sex, that impulse to eat. Just natural impulses that we have to refine and we have to work with. It's like the inner child within us that we have to work with. We can't completely deny it, because it will kick back. When you try to go cold turkey sometimes and say, I'm just going to give my nafs a good bashing, and you manage it for about 2 weeks and it says, hey up, Okay, now I'm going to give you some, and then the next thing you crash and you're completely burnt out. So you have to respect it. It's your riding horse on the way to your journey to Allah. And so that's the carnal desires. And then the fourth one is the satanic desires, like just really like gross, like, oof, why do, you just go, whoa, where'd that one come from? I don't usually get those sort of impulses. Just something that's just really out of the ordinary and just plain sinful. And obviously some people get those more regular than others. And so in Ramadan, that impulse towards satanic is either lessened or completely removed, depending on your interpretation of the hadith. So it's lessened if we say the seeds have still been sowed from the year, and now they're lessened in Ramadan because the shayateen can't follow them up. Or they're completely gone, and all your impulses towards anything that's untoward and inappropriate is from your own soul. Does that make sense? Okay. So then the others said, no, it's more metaphoric, this. It just means that it's good facilitated because of the circumstances. And that's what we see in Ramadan anyway, don't we? Regardless. We see some people who are usually don't have any sort of impulse to do good in their life. And let's say more from a religious standpoint, we mean in terms of religious practice. Then in Ramadan they become completely inspired. Some of the guys that don't even pray all year, they give us a run for the money, They're like knocking out Tarawih 20, is that all you got? I want to do some more. And they've got this real burning desire, and they manage to maintain it through the month of Ramadan. So Allah facilitates things for people unlike the rest of the year. And one of the reasons behind that, I believe, is because when we do things in community together, people don't want to feel like they're missing out. And so we're doing something, we're struggling towards something, and it's done as a collective, so people don't want to feel they're missing out on that. And so that's one of the blessings. To show, what's the lesson here? The lesson here is that shaitan, or any sort of impulse to take us away from the path, is far easier when we do things alone. When we do things as a collective, we come together and support one another, the shaitan's far less likely to have a grip on us. And we talk about the shaitan, why do we go tight, why do we stand close together in the prayer? Is because there's unity, it's a sense of unity and what's the word? Camaraderie, have I pronounced that right? Camaraderie. You feel that sense, it protects us from and supports us in doing good. Okay? And so that's another factor in Ramadan. Let me just make sure. Yeah. And I think this is one of the things I like to always talk about in the power of Ramadan is to show what we can achieve in Ramadan. I hear this from a lot of people. They say, I'd never be able to fast outside of Ramadan. But when it comes to Ramadan, it just seems like it's facilitated. Why is that? Because I believe that's because we're struggling in something together. It's a very powerful theme. And I often highlight examples of when a community are going through a struggle together, communally, how many barriers are removed due to that and how connected people feel. So I'll give you an example. In Keighley, I don't know if it happened in Leeds, generally Keighley gets hit by worse weather when the weather hits bad, is that we had a few years back when people were literally having to crawl on their knees to get across the road because it was so icy. Did you have this in Leeds? I see. So we had it that bad that people were like literally flying all over the place, and people were literally on their hands and knees just to get across the street because it was so icy. So I was walking down Highfield Lane in Keighley, and Highfield Lane's a really steep hill, and cars were like going into one another. So there I was walking down Highfield Lane, and a white woman, probably in her 20s, she wound down the window and she goes, "You're right there, darling. You're right there, love. Are you okay? You don't need anything." And I just looked and I thought, my goodness me. If there was any time other than this circumstances, she wouldn't have given me the time of day. But because we're all going through something and we're struggling through that, all the inhibitions fall away and we feel connected to one another. So fasting is a really powerful tool And that's why it's important to take advantage of Ramadan to do things collectively. Okay, whether it be just, it's a bit more difficult this year because of the late fast, but inviting people over to break fast with you. What people do have done in the past in our community is they give out dates before Ramadan, to welcome in the months of friends, and even to non-Muslim friends next door. He says we've got a month of Ramadan coming, and they, non-Muslims generally love dates, like especially if you get the majhul dates. They're like, they've never seen these things. They're usually used to those cheap Tunisian dates, that are glossed in like glucose syrup. I used to have those at Christmas when I was a kid. They were horrible. I used to like them then because I knew nothing else. But you give some people some, we had a friend of ours, he's a non-Muslim, come to our house, and I was doing date tasting with him. So first of all, I give him the majhul, and he say, look at the size of that whopper. Okay, and he'd be eating that. It's like eating a piece of meat, this thing. So he have that. Then I'll give him the ajwa. So you have the ajwa, and he say, that's like licorice, that is. And then I gave him my favourite, which is the sukri. Have you ever had the sukri? Those Saudi ones, they're like really, the ones that if you break fast in the mosque in Saudi, they give you those ones. They're the damage, those ones. They're proper nice. And they're like eating like treacle. So I gave him that, and he's like, whoa, that's a sweet rush, that is. And so you get to expose them to the sorts of dates that are out there, and they think, these Muslims, they're hiding some real stuff behind their doors. So it's an opportunity. And also we had another situation in Keighley a few years back with the floods. I don't know if you had floods in Leeds. And a lot of the Muslim community went down to actually help with the floods. And so it's a means for the community to bond in times of difficulty. And so what we do, and I think they're planning to do it in Keighley this year as well, we have one night in Ramadan where we get the non-Muslim friends to come, and they fast that day, and then we all sit round in a circle and we discuss what was their experience like. And I bring up these themes about when we're doing things collectively together, it breaks down all these, these inhibitions we have and insecurities around one another, because we're doing something together. Just recently, I'm working with a Christian group on it's called Click to Kick, which is about breaking porn addiction. They've got it's rife in everyone's community, and I invite. Basically, I'm going to start working with them. They've got an 8-week online course that's non-judgmental and discreet. And I thought it was an opportunity for people who are suffering from porn addiction, because it's a reality in our community, is to use Ramadan as a means to try to kick it, the habit. And so that's another opportunity as well for people with those sorts of struggles. Okay? And that breaks, like when we're working together on something, I'm working with non-Muslims, Christians specifically, and we both in our communities both know we struggle from these things, that it's something important, and we just get together and work. And that's far more productive than sitting around saying, oh, Islam says this, and what does Christianity say about this, these interfaith things. It has their place, I'm not dismissing it entirely, but I think it's far more effective to work on projects that are needed in the community, that are really important and affecting us.